It's 9:15. So I suppose we can actually start the class, right? Good morning once again.
Good morning, Doc.
Excellent. It's always a pleasure seeing you guys. I mean, not even a pleasure. It's always an exciting moment, you know.
Likewise.
Guys in the class. And I'm always looking forward to a very hot debate. Today would not be any So I know that it's almost like lining up debaters, you know, in a room and getting ready for it. So that's the kind of mood I actually envisage whenever I'm coming to the class. So
great.
And you know, if you have a class like this, you cannot afford not to prepare. You understand? Yes. Now, sometimes people have some kind of perception that teachers just have everything in their memories and they come and stand there. No, it's not like that. You've got to be preparing. Just like the Jehovah's Witnesses do. You have to have your script and you have to sit and prepare properly. Look at sections of the discussions of the debate before you come to class. Otherwise, it would show in your approach. So, and especially if you have a class that is that deep, that intellectual, you cannot afford to prepare. You understand? So I'm always happy to be in your class. I'm honored.
Thank you.
I think today we are going to have a very hot debate. I can imagine, because the topic that we're going to discuss, it's a very hot one, and it's a business. Actually, it's a business ethics. I want us to look at the case. Okay, let me just project the slide first. Then we can actually look at a case before, we start the discussion. So we're going to be on chapter 7, and it's business ethics fundamentals. I'm sure you can see the slides now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now, as I said, the content are quite many.
Is the chair too back, or is okay?
We've actually, I've actually broken it down into the parts of the book that we're using. So chapter 7 begins the business ethics, discussions in that book. So once we actually go through chapter 7, it means that the rest of the chapters, are covered up to chapter 11. But of course, in your readings, you have to actually make sure that you have actually covered some of the, other chapters as well. But each of these chapters that we are touching on are the beginnings of those discussions. So you would have, those discussions in that particular chapter. So from chapter 7, we'll move to chapter 11, and then we'll go to chapter 17. And all these, as I said, are actually summarizing their, chapters that follow them. And so you would be able to actually grasp the rest of the chapters if you have to read them. And as I said, business ethics fundamentals, or business ethics, actually, it's one of the most topical issues in advocacy and governance, what we call government relations, course. And it's very, very practical because it's fundamental to our service quality. Now, any business that do not have, or that does not have a guiding principle in terms of ethical conduct, you would realize that it would show in their service delivery, because when, ethics is not that clear. So when they are faced with ethical, issues, because they do not have a clear guidelines, that actually direct their path, you will see management always confused, not knowing what to do, because they are not a daily operational decisions, So it may not be part of your customer service, principles of customer service approaches, but they are ethical issues that when you solve them, it contributes to your service quality. And if you fail, it actually contributes to the downward slope of your service quality. So ethical issues or business ethics are fundamental to our quality service provision. They are fundamental to management decisions. They are fundamental to staff decisions and practices as well. So you'd realize that, we're going to see certain, principles and types of ethics, and you will find that they are at the very core of your, practice or of your service provisions, whether you're in HR, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in accounting, whether you're in finance, whether you're business, administration, or, you are in public administration. You realize that ethics are actually core to your service delivery and the quality of your service delivery. So it is very practical to whatever we do. And I'm sure the conversation will be very engaging. Now, there was an issue, I think last 2 years or last year, about our, who works in our? Is anybody here that works with our, as in African World Airlines, or what's the name, the full name? It's Africa World, right? Africa World Airlines. Is anyone who has a relationship with them?
Nawas.
Hello, Stanley Delphine, good morning.
Morning. Is there anyone having a relationship with our? Okay, so as I said, those who are in a very quiet place, you can leave your mics on, so I don't feel lonely. All right, so you can respond on behalf of your colleagues, because sometimes I don't know whether the network has gone off or is still active, and so you would be hearing hello, are you there? I think it makes it a little bit uncomfortable. Those of you in a very quiet place, you can leave your mics on, so long as we're not going to get into it. All right. So now, last year or last 2 years, there was an issue involving our and a customer, Miss Kriba, and it was about her crutches. And from our perspective, they didn't have any place to keep the crutches, so they didn't allow the lady to actually board the flight. Who heard that story?
Yeah, I heard it, sir.
Excellent. So I'm going to put
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I think our law firm is the one handling that case.
Oh, wow.
Actually.
That's interesting. That's great. Yeah, so obviously,
I'm not privy to the details because I'm not a lawyer.
but of course, you know the story, so you can give us some insight as well. Obviously, ethics is not so much about law, or it has nothing too deep about law. Of course, it's I don't know whether you can call it common law or no. I mean, those lawyers who are here can actually tell us what it is. But so I'm going to project the story, and maybe we can have a very brief read so that those of us who are not conversant with the story would know the story, and then we can actually discuss it briefly before we go to the text, so that it can preempt us some kind of understanding. All right. So I'm going to put up the story now. Let's see. Okay. All right. Can you see the screen, please?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, who would offer to read for us?
Face off.
Yakubu should read.
Yakubu.
No problem. I'm reading now.
Okay, Yakubu, so start for us.
Okay, Yakubu.
Okay, Africa World Airlines.
Wow.
Africa World Airlines on Saturday.
Now start from the heading.
The heading, okay. Kotoka International Airport.
Yeah.
Africa World Airlines allegedly prevent cripple from boarding flight.
Yeah.
Africa World Airlines on Saturday, 5th May 2018, prevented Rita Kriba, a person with disability, from boarding their flight because of her condition.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Kriba, who works with the aid of crutches, missed her flight to Kumasi from Accra as staff of the airline said the company's policy does not accommodate persons who cannot board their planes without aid. Attempts by a passenger to convince authorities to permit Ms. Kreber board the flight proved fatal. An official of the airline caught on the tape during a conversation with another passenger who attempted to understand the policy said, every aircraft and its configuration, they are aircraft that accept passengers who are unable to walk. Into brackets, they are aided with their walking apparatus into their seats directly. There are also other aircraft who will only take you to the stairs and you have to find yourself a seat. Our aircraft, we will not accept passengers who cannot board their seat on their own. If you cannot board your seat by yourself, we cannot accept you. If you cannot walk a long distance, we only help you with a wheelchair to the stairs. From there, you have to be able to climb the stairs and be able to walk to your seat. If you cannot do all these things, then it is unfortunate we cannot accept you. After he was pushed to allow Ms. Kreber on the flight quizzes, in case of emergencies, how does she come out? Ms. Kreber told classfmonline.com that she got the ticket through her travel agent and did not know the airline had that policy, but our official insisted such information was available on their website.
Okay. Now, Yakubu, let's get it to, let's stop here. We've got the substance of the issue. Obviously, the rest of it, yeah. So the substance of the issue is that the lady, in fact, I actually wrote a news article, criticizing our, and I was very, active on social media criticizing our. In fact, I think as a result of my social media, Twitter activities, they issued, a press release, which the press release itself, I found it, very, very ridiculous to say the least. So I was particularly involved in this story, and I used it as a case study in my CIM presentation when I had to present marketing and macro issues, ethical issues in marketing to CIM. So I was particularly involved in this particular issue from that direction. Of course, I wanted to invite Ms. Kreber to my class, my advocacy class at the time, but she couldn't make it. Now, from the substance of the issue, as I've read, ours says that they have a policy that suggests that disability to a certain extent, you cannot actually be on board their flight. And it looks like they have a very cogent reason for that. And one of them, it says, just in case of emergencies, which we know about aircraft emergencies, like either they have to make an emergency landing, etc. How does that, how does she come out? Obviously, they made a lot of, sense in that respect. But crucially also, Ms. Kreber said that when she bought the ticket, she didn't know of that policy. And then, of course, our came to say that they had it. Now, let us start the discussion before we go into the text. How many of you thought that from business ethics perspective, Africa Airlines or our somehow was in the right? And how many of you thought that perhaps they are not in the right, and then Ms. Kreber was in the right? How many of you? Yeah?
Yeah, Doc.
Yes, Yakubu.
And there's before I start, there's a missing ingredient in here.
Okay.
And they said in the write-up,
yeah,
when they were struggling to get the Miss Kriba into the flight.
Yeah.
One of the staff was caught in conversation saying that every aircraft and its configuration.
Yeah.
And so my question is, if our aircraft hasn't got those configuration to be able to aid Miss Kriba into the flight,
yeah,
then they should have made it publicly for everybody to know, rather than saying that it is in their website. That's why I have a problem.
Excellent. Good point. Yeah.
Doc, so let me add up to what Yakubu was saying. So if they are saying that it's not all their aircraft that have the capacity to later board the flight. In the first place, if you are booking a ticket, they will ask if you are disabled or you have any form of disability, so that they can make preparations for you. So if they knew the aircraft that she was going to board didn't have those equipment and all that, in the first place, they shouldn't have issued a ticket to her, or they should have communicated to her directly that the flight that will be embarking on the trip doesn't have the necessary equipment for her to join. Instead of letting her come all the way to the airport and the scene was created. So I think African world, they weren't right in this regard.
Now, before you come in, yes.
Yeah. I wanted to top up to what my colleague just said.
Remy, before you come in, let me make a disclosure. When the case was being analyzed, Africa World, the understanding was that apparently Ms. Kriba sent someone, so there was an agency issue. Ms. Kriba had sent somebody to go and purchase the ticket. Obviously, that person wasn't a disabled person. So apparently, the one who sold the ticket to that individual was the opinion that, the one who is actually going to board the airline, the flight, was not a disabled person. Now, there is a caveat here, because if the person gave you a name, they probably should have asked whether are you the passenger or you are buying it for someone. So again, that caveat was not clear. And then the person might have disclosed that I'm buying for somebody, and then they said, okay, is the person a disabled person or not? Now, these details didn't come in, all right, but we got to know it when the case had happened and we're analyzing them. Are you with me? Okay, so Romeo, come in, please.
It's rather David, but I think you said my point.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Doc, you said my point. If she bought the ticket through an agent, this is the likely event that may happen.
Okay, David. All right, thanks. Yeah, Romeo.
So, Doc, I just want us to look at some fundamental issues concerning this case.
Yeah.
First and foremost, what is the role of the regulator? And what is the standard in this industry as far as some of these policies are concerned?
Fantastic.
So we have to
I
look
hope
at
you guys are writing them down. Okay, great. So we're talking about the role of the regulator, and then second one was what?
The standard.
The standard
in the industry.
Excellent. Industry standard. Yeah. Excellent. Fantastic point. Yeah. Okay, great. Daniel.
Good morning, Doc. Good morning, guys. I think on this issue, to borrow the word our official used, it's unfortunate, but they couldn't admit her onto the flight. This industry is a very highly regulated industry, and there are protocols. If they don't plan for keeping her safe in case of an emergency, accept her onto the flight, because if something happens to her, then
yeah. Okay. Okay. I think Daniel, we got the import of what you were saying. That obviously, if the airline per its setup. Okay, so if the airline per its facilities has not the capacity to protect her in case of emergency, then they could be in trouble as well. So from that perspective, I think we've got the input, the point that you wanted to make. Either before you come in, let's ask Bridget to come in next. Bridget.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so from I think the pages is not from my end.
Yeah.
I think it's from Daniel.
I think it's coming from Daniel.
Page 7. Okay.
Yeah.
So from as I said, firm is working on the case, and then from the legal perspective, why this case was taken on was that Ms. Rita Kriba was discriminated against, and then ridiculed per the scene, and then the scenario that happened at the airport when it was time for boarding the flight. But critically looking at the case, we realized that our didn't have any disclaimer. They didn't have any disclaimer to say that they wouldn't accept any disabled person on their flight. So yeah, so it means that everyone can board the flight at any time to wherever they are going to.
Okay.
But there was a breach of, let's say, contract, because she has bought her ticket, and then she gets there, and then you tell her that we can't allow you. Moreover, you could have helped her one way or the other onto the flight. And then make sure she's not sitting at an exit point. Yeah. So I think our really messed up, like in this case, our really messed up.
Okay.
Yeah, really being taken on.
Okay, great. All right.
Hello, sir.
Pfizer.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, this is Emmanuel Jan.
Yeah, Emmanuel.
Yeah, hello.
It's
yes.
Faisal next. So let's listen to Faisal, and then because you have to lift up your hand. Faisal.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
you. Hello? Okay, great.
Your voice is...
Yes. So, it may be...
Okay. Faisal, your line is not stable. Your line is not stable. Shall we go to Judith and then...
Emmanuel.
Yeah, let's go to Judith. Yeah, Judith.
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. In the first place, I was about to kind of blame the lady and the agency a bit. But per the explanation Bridget gave,
hello,
I think I'll have to reserve my comment.
Okay.
Because I thought they should have made research about the flight agency before going in the first place board it. But then since it wasn't stipulated that this and that is what they require, and the lady also didn't have any idea, I think I'll reserve my comment.
Excellent. Okay, you can even bring it up.
Yes, sir.
Discussion. Okay, Emmanuel.
Yes, sir. I think I will blame the one whoever went to purchase the ticket for the woman, because I'm sure the person knew the woman's condition, and that is one thing he should have taken into consideration first. That I'm buying the ticket for a person who is disabled and cannot do certain things that able-bodied persons can do. So I think that there was a mistake on the part of the one who went to buy the ticket for the woman, because I have a similar story or issue about the Diasa dance competition.
Yes, the one who just won the previous one, the one that the previous one they did, and there hasn't been any competition. PM. Yeah, I think as part of the award package, she was supposed to have been sponsored to Dubai through Emirates Airline.
Yeah, I think I heard.
And then, yes, and then I think the organizers knew about the lady's condition. Yes. So they quickly contacted Emirates that this is the information or the problem we have at hand. Considering the lady's fatness or personality, can you be in the position to accommodate her on your flight? Yes, and I think Emirates was boldly, they came out boldly enough and then told the organizers that no, we don't have that capacity to accommodate the woman. Because when they traveled to Dubai, I followed them, and then I didn't see the winner of that particular competition anywhere in some of the places that they visited. And then the information I gathered was that the woman was too fat to be accommodated by Emirates.
Okay.
So I think that there was a mistake on the part of the one whoever went to purchase the ticket for the.
Okay, great point, guys. I know that it's a very topical issue. A lot of your hands are up. I would indulge you to hold your question. Let's start the slides, and then we'll come back to the contributions and the questions. All right. So please write your questions and your contributions down, so that when we come back, we can actually get them. So good points that we've made. So today we're looking at business ethics and how it is. What's the definition of the business ethics? You know, what's the makeup of it? How do we come by an ethical decision? And some of these issues we're having it now because it looks like for a long while, I mean, we haven't actually paid attention to ethical issues, ethical conduct in our country, especially when it comes to businesses and even individually, the way we say things to people, the kind of words we use. We sometimes do not come to the appreciation that they are discriminatory or there are ethical challenges in them. So that's why we're going to look at this. So we're going to look at the the description of how the public regards business ethics. You know, we're going to look at the public and its perception about business ethics. We will define ethics and appreciate the complexities of ethics, etc. Okay, now when we talk about business ethics, I'm sure you can see the slides, right? Can you all see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're saying that the public's interest in business ethics is in all-time high. You know, obviously because of the things that have happened, in the business community. Typical example is what we talked about, Enron, the last time. A company that actually cooked its books, a company that actually applied what we call creative accounting, and that's when the word creative accounting started having attention. In a company that wanted to look good in order that people would buy its shares so that they can actually make gains on the stock market and the capital market. And since Enron's case, we've seen a lot of other cases. We've seen, big, multinationals fall within or fall into the case of business ethics. I mean, we remember when I think, is it Mobil, the British, what do you call, was it Mobil? No, the British oil company that actually had a spill.
British Petroleum.
British BP, yeah, BP, British Petroleum, and its case and the subsequent, removal or resignation of their boss. I mean, there have been quite a lot of issues. The issue about, the UK, the issue in UK about the what they call the libel, the libel, issue where banks were charging, what do you call, interest rates. They were actually manipulating interest rates, from that section. There was issue about banks actually selling or double selling insurance packages to customers without their knowledge. There had been so many issues that have actually confronted the business, sector, and so has pushed business ethics to the higher level where the public now expect a lot of things. Now, if you look into our own society, those days it was hard for you to actually buy something and return it, all right? There was no return policy. Although you would identify a defect of a product, once you buy it, you don't return it, all right? Now, this was a very huge, ethical issues, but the problem is our society didn't confront it. In fact, it was more of multinationals that actually came into this country that made us understand that, in fact, when you buy something, you can return it. Return policy was nowhere in Ghana. So you buy something, you go home, it's defective, you cannot return it until some of these multinationals actually came into the system and introduced some of these issues, which were completely ethical issues, all right? So we'll actually look at that. Now, let's look at inventory of ethical issues in business. So we're trying to compartmentalize where ethical issues can come from. One of them is employee-employer relations, all right? Now, with employee-employer relations, there could be a huge ethical issues, in there. Now, when we say employee-employer relations, what are some of the things that you can think about? Employee-employer relations, for example.
Jody, bring me a towel.
All right. Okay. So suddenly she's very hot where she is. So okay, let's go. What are some of the employee-employer relations that you can think of? Guys, employee-employer relations. The employees reporting to employer, right?
Yes, sir.
Reporting to employer is one. Commitment to the employer, yeah? Commitment, employees' commitment to the employer, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
All right, what else? Faisal?
We have trust issues.
Trust issues, okay.
Yeah.
So trust between the employee and employer, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right. What other relations can we think about?
Another one is respect.
Respect.
Mutual
Okay.
respect.
Yeah, respect. Yeah, respect and obedience, isn't it? Great one. What are some of the other things that we can think about?
May I add loyalty?
Work conditions.
Loyalty, great one. So all these things that we have actually mentioned, these relationships, there could be ethical issues in there, isn't it? One, if we take loyalty, for example, there is a possibility of employer taking the loyalty for granted and as a result manipulating, isn't it? So
absolutely,
you could have an ethical issue where the employer, knowing that the employee is fully committed to them, they could start undercutting them, underpaying them, all right? And knowing that, oh, Uncle Baby, they've been working with me for a long time, and therefore they're not going to anywhere, or they have nowhere to go. Sometimes we hear some of these comments. Oh, as for this staff, they have nowhere to go. They've worked with me since I started. They had no qualification. I helped them to gain qualification. And so they are very committed, loyal to me, and they will not leave. And as a result of that, they end up, cheating them. They end up, underpaying them. They end up, doing all sort of things. And so you could see that from loyalty perspective, there could be ethical issues, isn't it? Now, we mentioned trust, and we mentioned reporting, and reporting to the employer. What are some of the ethical issues that you can think about from reporting? Because the relationship between employee and employer, you are supposed to be responsible and then be reporting your activities to employer. Sometimes the employer, because of that authority that they hold on you, could frustrate you, isn't it? Even when you have actually done the right thing and then you are reporting, they could actually refuse to accept that particular report just because they want to frustrate you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the issues that we can think about in employee-employer relations?
Okay. Creating unrealistic goals or
Exactly.
targets.
Fantastic. Creating unrealistic targets, you know, because they have that reporting, you know, what do you call, authority over you. They just create unrealistic objectives, unrealistic targets. You know, how you achieve it is not their concern. And we have seen all these, or most of these, within our banking sector. All right. Personally, I've had some of my students report to me, you know, that they have unreasonable, even national service national service, you know, workers who are just gone into the work. They have unreasonable targets, you know, ascribed to them or, you know, allocated to them. And the bosses don't care how you achieve it. And that actually, you know, puts our young ladies in a very vulnerable situation. And because I'm very close to my students, sometimes they come to the office to come and see me, and they will be, you know, sharing some of these issues with you. You know, the concerns about unrealistic targets and how you are supposed to achieve it. It's ridiculous, you know. All right, good point. Now let's see employer-employee relations. Of course, it's almost the same, isn't it? But the employer-employee relations also, you know, come in. Sometimes employees also take advantage of the employer because of trust and loyalty. They would also be using the time that they're supposed to, you know, work for other things. All right. So all these things are happening. Company-customer relations. What are some of them? Company-customer relations. Company-customer relations. Yeah.
Hello, this is
Yeah.
Bridget.
Bridget.
I just a quick question. I just want to ask if harassment
Of
will
course.
go under
Yeah.
employer-employee.
Fantastic. Yes. Harassment and taking undue advantage, you know, and harassment, we can put it in many forms: sexual harassment, you know, and many other harassment that you can actually think about. All right. Good point. Yeah. Nana Kwesi.
Thank you. Company customer relations, when the company is not straightforward with pricing to its customers, that could be an ethical issue as well.
That's right. That is being very not transparent. Yeah. Price transparency missing, lack of price transparency. Yeah. Ethical issue there. Yeah. What else?
Yeah, abracadabra here.
Yeah, abracadabra, yes.
Yes. So customers can also take advantage of companies due to the fact that most companies would want to sell to them on credit term payments.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time they do not pay as is expected of them. So you realize that payments are made late. But because they know they are the ones that can only sell what the company produces and share with them, they take advantage of that.
Excellent. Good point. Yeah. So again, customer relation. Company is supposed to supply to the customer wholesome goods, isn't it? And
yes, sir.
Sometimes they are selling unwholesome goods, you know, in a way that the customer cannot see, you know. Yeah, good one. What else? Company customer relations.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
And this Michael.
Michael, yes.
Yeah. Company can unduly delay the payments of supplies made to them by customers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a good point. Now, Abina.
Okay, sir. So, company customer relationship. Customers sometimes harass staff of the company on the basis that the customer is always right. So some customers just ride on this and then they try to take advantage.
So again, the harassment. All right. Okay, Elliot.
Yes, Doc. I was thinking about companies not declaring their policies or their work, let me say, instructions to customers. So sometimes they hide behind the fine print and not disclose some of these policies to customers who come in for their goods or services.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So they're not transparent with the rules of engagement. Yeah, Judith.
Yes, sir. Please, can favoritism be part?
Fantastic. Yeah. Whereby people actually treat some customers differently and
yes.
All right. Good point. PD.
Yeah, Doc, I'm thinking about the issues with guarantee and warranty.
Yeah.
If there's some kind of confusion as to when customers are supposed to be given a warranty or when they're supposed to be given a guarantee, there could be that conflict.
Okay, that's a good point as well. Now, let me say something about the favoritism that Judith mentioned, and I am saying that because it is very subtle. The point I'm going to make is very subtle, but it's creeping in our society that we're not paying attention to it. I was asking myself one day because of some observations that I had. All right, do we think, and this is controversial, do we think that suppose people who are supposedly Christians or bear Christian names somehow receive quality service than those who are supposedly Muslim or bear Muslim names? Of course, other religions, we cannot tell because, but when someone has a Muslim name, it is clear. When someone has a Christian name, it is clear. Have we observed in the society that, from what Judith said about favoritism, have we observed that there is a subtle or there's an undertone of service quality depending on religious grounds? Faisal, your hands had been up. Are you responding to this question?
Yes, I actually wanted to raise, so let me just raise one of the ethical issues between customer, and then I'll also respond to that.
Okay.
Yes, so I wanted to about privacy issue regarding customer information as one of the ethical issues. Yes, because these days companies are taking customer information and selling it out to others to research, and then
we had one of the issues where the EC was actually blamed that they've sold exactly. Okay, good point.
Okay.
All right.
Now, regarding the service, I feel very uncomfortable with that since I am a Muslim.
Yeah, but now it's a class discussion.
That's fine. I think it is the case, and it has happened many times. I've observed many times, including me myself. There was a case I was doing quite recently. It has to do with the police. It was a criminal matter I was dealing with, and my client, being Muslim, was not treated fairly at all. And the police even went ahead to make comments suggesting that people of her kind are always troublesome, even though she was the complainant in the case who had been assaulted, and she was given a medical form to go to the police. Aside that, too, I've also witnessed many instances where you go to the hospitals, and for some reasons, many of my folks are there most of the time. When one person is sick, it is incumbent on Muslims that we should visit. It is virtually like an obligation.
It's even within our communities.
So you see us coming plenty, then the nurses will be shouting at you, and all that. And also, by the moment you go in there and you appear a bit educated, like you know what you're about, then the treatment towards you changes. But on a normal day, if you are wearing jalabia or mayafi and you come to hospitals, the treatment towards you is substandard.
Excellent. All right, good point. All right, Nigel.
Yes, good. Thank you. I don't know whether my contribution falls in line with your
asking, don't worry. Go ahead. Yeah.
It was a research that was carried out in the petroleum downstream sector by a few BDCs. I think it came in the papers around 2019 that the National Petroleum Authority, who have their CEO being Hassan, Yeah. The research was the fact that a lot of Muslims are employed in the National Petroleum Authority compared to Christians. So it was a survey that was actually carried out by some of the BDCs. And when you look at the number of Muslims there, the allegation was that because they have the CEO being a Muslim, almost all the workers, right from the receptionist through the various departments, we have a lot of Muslims there. So I think
excellent.
This
so this is the employer-employee relationship, kind of ethics issue. All right, good point. Very good point. Yeah. Now, let me give an opportunity to Hilda before Gideon you come in. Hilda.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Hilda.
So I wanted to ask if this is also done on the tribe level.
Yeah, Hilda, we didn't hear you clearly. Say it again.
I wanted to ask also if this same issue is seen.
Of course. Yeah.
Tribe.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. It's the same thing. I mean, the same principle. All right.
Yeah, because where I work, for instance, my CEO is an away. I'm actually the only non-aware within the organization. And what I realized was that the way I'm treated, I don't know if it's my mind, but she's friends with almost every other person within the organization, but I'm treated a bit differently. And I don't speak the language too. So when, they always have communications in that language. And it's like, we are working and we all need to to understand each other, right?
That's right.
Just for efficiency.
Yeah.
But I'm always in the dark because I don't get what they are saying.
Excellent.
And
so that's a clear ethical issue.
Yeah.
Because it makes you then feel uncomfortable. You don't know what's actually going on, isn't it? And this particular issue actually came up in one of our committees where some lecturers actually speak Twi in class and they will not translate that into English for especially foreign students to actually understand it. And then when it happens like that, the foreign students get confused because everybody's laughing and they don't know what is going on. And it's become a very big issue that we have to address, all right? So definitely that's one ethical issue there, which is employee-employee relationship and an employee, management relationship. So that's a fantastic example. Okay, so we have Gideon, and then I'll come to Ajara, then maybe we can move on. Gideon.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Okay, so in regards to the question you asked, I'm thinking that the reverse is also true.
Yeah.
Because you see, it's a norm that in Accra, usually, in as much as like Faisal said, when you are a bit educated and you are a Muslim, you get those treatments. I'm sure that when you go to the north or you go to a particular community where the people there are also Muslims, they tend to support their own as against you. I had a case, I think last year we had an accident, and the accident was just behind the Flagstaff house.
Yeah.
Sorry, the Jubilee house. And you see, at the time, the guy who got the accident with us he was not really talking. He was like, hey, he was even apologizing until friends of him came and then they started speaking their language. And then, wow, the whole case turned as though we were at fault.
Okay.
And it was more like we were literally like, hey, you were just talking about even pleading on behalf of these guys, and then now you are talking as though the issue. So I think it's a reverse issue. When you go to a section, it happens to Muslim. When you go to a section, it happens to Christian. And so it's a balancing issue. It's not really one-sided.
Great point. Which means that we have a very huge ethical issue. Ajara. Ajara, we're listening.
Good morning. Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
My colleagues. So, sir, I totally agree, and I can relate because I have a name that is quite confusing. So people keep wondering, are you a Christian or a Muslim? Now, so I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian, but with a Muslim background or Muslim family. But I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
So I get that experience a lot because at times you get a predominantly Christian environment and they assume you're Muslim. Then they find out you're Christian. And the first thing that they say, oh, sorry, we thought you're a Muslim. And I asked them the first question that, why do you have to apologize? Assuming I was a Muslim.
That's right.
Why should you start by saying, oh, sorry, I thought you were a Muslim?
You see?
Then secondly, to like my colleague just said, it also happens in the reverse. When I'm going to buy wachi, I like to always speak Hausa when I get to the wachi joint.
Yeah.
And once you speak Hausa, you know that the woman is going to favor you. Once you speak Hausa, the woman will favor you. Then the lady coming to speak tree, when you tell her to give it, like that one, there's not even money.
So is it an ethical issue on your side as well? Because you're benefiting.
It is, but like I said in the chat room, it works for me both sides. For me, it works for me both sides. So I'm enjoying the partiality actually, but it's not the best. It's not the best.
Okay, Linda, let's hear you then. By virtue of your class rep, you know that's the ethical issue.
And the customer relations, I think that another ethical issue is conflict of interest.
Yeah, we didn't hear you properly.
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest. Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Conflict of. Okay, guys. So we've seen how the nature of these, ethical issues in the various facets of management. All right, in the various facets of the organizational setup. Even the relationship between employee and employee, huge ethical conduct or ethical issues there. And I keep telling people that, well, maybe because of some background that I have, I'm particularly careful about using certain descriptions to call people. In our settings, people will say, "Oh, call me the short guy," and "Call me that fat lady," etc. These are things that if you do not check it, all right, and then you use that in Europe or America, you will be in trouble. You are completely in trouble. All right, and they are not really a prescription in terms of management. But they are seriously ethical issues because the person that you are describing as short could actually claim to be depressed by your description. So you want to be mindful of how you actually use some of these things to address people. And unfortunately in our system, it is easier for somebody to say, "Oh, that why can't you see? Why are you blind?" Now, some of these, kind of using descriptions of people's conditions as a normal language or to refer as a reference point to, they have a very huge ethical implication, all right? So as management people, we have to be mindful of these facets of the company or the business level and the kind of ethical issues that can actually arise in our relationship with, the stakeholders. It is very, very crucial. So we've got to be mindful of that, all right? Now, let's look at the types and meaning of ethics and approaches, all right? So we have ethics, which...
Doc, sorry.
Yeah.
Hello, Doc.
Yes.
Sorry, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Before you continue.
Okay.
Doc, is this something that can change?
I think it can change. I mean,
because you see, example, yesterday that's the first time I was going to a particular salon to have a shave. And then I entered and the guy started.
You better behave yourself. Hear me.
Hello.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. I entered the salon and then the lady who had to usher me in was like, started speaking English. And so I responded in English. I went to sit. Then she spoke Gan.
Yeah.
Then I also started speaking the Gan. Then she was like, "Hey, I didn't know you could speak Gan." I said, "I'm a Gan." Say, "Oh, you don't look like a Gan. You do blah blah blah." And that is say, "Hey, now like they speaking. Hey, how can you be a Gan?" You get that thing. So and it's something I agree with. So it would be I'm having this challenge as to whether this thing is ever going to change.
It's difficult, but you see, it takes some level of awareness, social awareness, all right, in order to change some of it, because they are very ingrained. They are very ingrained in our system that people do not find, people do not find anything wrong with some of these references, but they are hugely, inappropriate. All right, so I think that it takes some level of awareness. And it takes some level of education for people to start being conscientized, all right? The unfortunate thing is that a lot of educated people within our system do not even see that as a problem, all right? Making references to people's body sizes, passing certain jokes, etc. A lot of people don't see it as a problem. That's unfortunate. But I believe that as the society grows and as we, kind of change, there will be a time that there will be a change in some of these things, I believe.
Yeah, Doc, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, Doc, I'm actually very confused right now because I think some of the things that we mention as ethical issues have lived with us for a really long time. I mean, as I'm confused because some of these things are like macro cultural issues that you find in the environment that we are. I mean, if you go to a Muslim community, they have their way of life, and immediately you look different, they might treat you differently. If you go to a Christian-dominated community, it might be the same way, and so are ethnic-related issues and all that. I have lived in Texas where I was the only black person, and the neighborhood was all white, Caucasian, middle age, and I was the only black person. Anytime I came around, people were taking pictures of me, like as if I was the guy coming to rob them,
Yeah.
And I understood it at that time. I understood that because I was the only person there,
Yeah.
And they had this, idea that black people are bad and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is how we can separate the general, beliefs and attitudes of people from business ethics, where it has to deal with like policies and understandings that we have about how to deal with business.
I get a point that you're making. I mean, the issue is that the discussions that we're having, especially when it comes to the social and cultural settings, they are the same thing that actually seep into business. Remember, business is not, when you talk about business, it is not inanimate. These are institutions that are actually filled with human beings, and people actually man businesses, all right? So certainly our socio-cultural frames are what actually seep into business. Now, the point that you made, remember that society is dynamic. Society is not static. And for me, even some of our, what you call proverbs, all right, are inherently unethical. There are certain words in our proverbs that immediately you say it. In fact, in modern society, you have to cringe, isn't it? There are certain proverbs when you say them, people will cringe. So you rather not say them, all right? So the point I'm making is that we have to be mindful that society is dynamic, all right? It changes from time to time. And as society is dynamic, it means that our dealings would be multifaceted. We'll be dealing with people of different background, different, create different, attitudes and behavior. So once we know that, then we have to be mindful of what it is that we would say that could be offensive or could be seen as insensitive and offensive to the other people. Immediately that realization comes, you have to check yourself because it's an ethical issue. So I can appreciate the cultural basis of it, the social basis of it, but I'm saying that the world is moving in a way that we are no longer, homogeneous in where we live. We are becoming increasingly heterogeneous with people coming from diverse backgrounds. Now you have to be mindful of what you say, because what you say could be acceptable in your, village or in your background may not be acceptable in the other. And that's why language now, I mean, I'll give you a typical example. I think in the note somewhere, they said there is a reference where some people say, oh, this is my what do you call? I don't know, maybe one of you can help me. This is
slave.
My slave. All right. I remember one day this guy used it. What's his name? Haruna. Haruna used it at one function. And immediately he said, oh, please, this is accepted in our place, all right? And he had to explain himself. Imagine that he didn't, because everybody was like, how could you say that? Are you with me? So I can understand the point you're making, but the issue is that we have to be mindful of the dynamics of the time. I don't know whether you are with me on that. I mean,
yes, Doc. Yes, Doc.
Okay. Okay, so Ajira, I know, and I know your hands up. Let's move on so that we can catch up. All right. Okay, so moral conduct. So we say ethics is about a discipline that deals with moral duty and obligation, where moral, conduct relates to principles of right, of wrong, and of fairness in behavior. Obviously, we actually understand that what is right, what is wrong, and what is fairness has a basis in how we are raised and how we are trained and our understanding of it. All right, because what is right in one setting may not be right in the other setting. But predominantly, there's what is also called universal, morals or universal values. All right, these universal values, such as killing, everybody knows that killing is wrong. All right, but of course, at some point in time, which will come to principles of ethics, at some point in time, killing could also be seen as right. And these are some of the justifications surrounding what we call the democratic project, or the Americans would say regime change project. They believe that certain people had to be eliminated in the system in order that they can preserve the social good or the public good. So at some point in time, we have a universal values of right and wrong, and so everybody could see that in this instance this is right, in this instance this is wrong, but they are also fundamentally interlaced with our social and cultural background and cultural values. Right now, business ethics concerned with morality and fairness in behavior, actions, and practices that take place within a business context. And then it is the study of practices in organizations, and is a quest to determine whether these practices are acceptable or not. So when we talk about business ethics, we're looking at the social frames, or the frames that we use to actually come to an understanding that something is right or something is wrong or something is fair, to guide our conduct, with the customer or with the business stakeholders. Because obviously, as we have come to realize, the business doesn't live in a different planet. Businesses exist within the society or within the social milieu, which means that its ethical frames would always emanate from that social milieu, all right, that it actually exists within it. So we actually derive the business ethics from that particular context. Now, when we look at the meanings and types of ethics, we have two types, largely. The descriptive ethics actually talks about, ethics based on that we can actually identify based on what is occurring. All right. So something is occurring, and that is where, the Kriba, Miss Kriba, and our case comes in. Clearly, there was a case study. There was a case that was happening, that was unfolding right in our eyes. All right. Now, immediately we could describe the ethical issues that pertain in that particular case. So, assuming that you were present at the airport, all right, and here is the case: our staff are saying they cannot allow Miss Kriba to actually board the plane when almost everybody was boarded. What do you think will come to mind? Immediately you will say, oh, she's been discriminated against, isn't it? So clearly, when it comes to descriptive ethics, it is what we can actually describe or what we can actually see as unfolding, and then determine or make a determination whether it's right or wrong. Are you with me? So when it comes to descriptive ethics, it is about, there's a case that we can actually make a judgment, and we can come to a realization or a determination that this is not right, this is wrong, okay? Now, when it comes to normative ethics is actually about what ought to be. So our actually prescription of what should be the case. So in most cases, we say that normative ethics is abstractive because it is not unfolded. Sometimes when the situation unfolds, before the context and other things will come in order to make a judgment that this is really an ethical issue of this particular magnitude. Now, normative is more abstractive, is what we think it must be. Until the situation happens, then of course we can go back to the drawing board and say, actually we thought this was an ethical issue of this direction, but because of the example that has happened, perhaps it may not, or perhaps it is, all right? Then we can actually go back and then make some adjustment. So in most cases, businesses will try to have what works or what must work as a guidelines for ethical conduct, all right? But when the situation happens, you realize that certain contexts actually come into play, and that it could challenge the normative ethics or the normative issues that we have actually penned down as the ethical conduct. I hope I'm clear on these two issues, on these two types. Any question or contribution? Or if you want to see clarity.
So please, can you take the normative ethics once again?
All right. So we're saying that we're saying that normative ethics is about, we ascribing certain things as ethical or not ethical. And this actually comes as a result of best practices, as a result of industry characteristics, as a result of companies' own missions and visions, all right? So we ascribe them, we write them down, or we put them together as ethical issues. Now, remember that means that there hadn't been a practice of it, or there hadn't been a happening of it, all right? Immediately the ethical issue happened, or something happens that we could identify as ethical issues. Some of these normative ethics that we have actually penned down, or what we thought ought to be, could be challenged, all right? And that is what immediately that happens. I mean, what we can actually identify as what is happening become the descriptive ethics or descriptive ethical issues. Emmanuel, are you with me?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So the normative immediately is what we think should be the case in terms of ethics, all right? And the descriptive is what is or what is happening now as the ethical issue. Do you get it?
Yes.
So, Doc, where does that place our incidents, for instance?
Correct. So if you take the hour incidents, all right? If you take the hour incidents, now hour had said that planes, depending on the makeup of the plane, all right? Certain people cannot board, and I think Yakubu actually described it fairly well. Let me check the story so that I can actually make reference to that. It says that I'm trying to look at it says that every aircraft and its configuration. There are aircraft that accept passengers who are unable to walk, and they are aided with their walking apparatus into their seat, all right? There are also other aircraft who will only take you to the stairs, and you have to help yourself. Then they go on to say that if there's an emergency, or if emergency, how would they be able to protect that customer? All right. So it says, in case of emergency, how does she come out? So from our position, because of the makeup of their aircraft, all right, they have put certain measures in place in order that can protect people. So in this case, the disabled customer will not even be on board, so that in case of emergency, they could even, they risk losing their lives. Perhaps they could actually see it as, ethical issue. That's why they put these measures in place. So from the normative ethics position, this is what they have prescribed as the rule of engagement. Are you with me?
Doc, can I add something to this?
Yeah.
Okay, just about a year ago, I had an old man who had been in Switzerland for long years. She happened to be in Tema, and she had mild stroke.
Yeah.
Was admitted at Kuala Lumpur Hospital. And to my surprise, the health insurance in Switzerland was able to pay for her flight back to Switzerland for them to treat him. And the airline, which was British Airlines, was able to come out with a vehicle that could transport the passenger from Kuala Lumpur on his hospital bed to the flight.
Yeah.
And then to Switzerland. So based on the configuration aspect you're talking of, no, it means the our people, they don't have up to speed or up to date.
Yes, excellent.
If they have been business and they were in the business, they will have those configuration in their flight to cater for all kind of passengers in the system.
That's right. That's right.
No, but sir, Yakubu, you can't compare African or World Airline to British Airways.
Okay, guys. Let me check with Linda whether she was clear on that. Linda, so are you clear on that?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Nana Kwesi, your hand is up.
Thank you very much, Doc. For this particular discussion, if you look at the safety regulations of the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority, it says that it says aircraft operators shall not refuse to transport persons with disabilities on the basis of their disabilities, except for safety requirements as specified in the regulations. So the point about they not having the ability to, as it were, evacuate such a person from the aircraft in the event of a dangerous activity or whatever happens on the aircraft, that is on the part of is sound, is justifiable. Yeah. But the other part is that same regulation says that an air carrier or its agent shall make publicly available in accessible format and in at least the same languages as the information made available to other passengers any restrictions on their carriage or on that of mobility equipment due to the size of aircraft. So the question then becomes, did our make this information publicly available? Was the passenger in question aware of these restrictions? If it is not, then I think that our did not do the right thing. And
fantastic contribution, Nana Kwesi. And I'm sure that the regulator will go ahead to define what they meant by if the airline has not got a capacity to ensure the safety of the client, right? They would go ahead to define the range of the capacity. All right. Yes. So as we're discussing, I'm sure all of you are actually relating it to your work. All right. Because you could see that, look, from where I stand in my office, I see a lot of ethical issues. All right. I see a lot of ethical issues that the university is supposed to deal with. All right. And I'm sure that some of them may not have come clear to you until maybe some of these discussions that we're having. All right. Some of the things you may think that it's regular. Oh, this is normal. But when you start having some of these conversations, you realize that, look, a lot of our companies could have been in trouble, especially if we were in Europe or in America, especially Scandinavian countries, all right? A lot of us would have been out of business, to be honest. All right. Abracadabra, you are coming to the party late today. Let's hear you.
Sorry, I think I didn't lower my hand.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Hello, sir.
Yes, Gideon.
Okay, sir. So, a quick question. Is it possible that in a particular scenario or in a particular case, we would have both the descriptive and then the normative ethics in one case?
Yeah. So the point we're making is that with the normative, it is what we think should be. Now, that could be challenged when the issue actually happens. Are you with me? So you would say that the normative is almost the descriptive, what we usually say, the academic or the what's the word that we usually say? You know, the theoretical part of ethical conduct. So you're actually writing down, prescribing what the ethical conduct is or must be. All right, when the staff or the company actually faces a particular ethical question. All right. But then immediately a case happens, then that particular normative ethics is come to play or it will come to play for us to make a judgment whether it is really relevant or suitable, all right? Or we must actually adjust it. So you could say that it is the normative one is what guides us, all right? And then the descriptive one is what actually manifests. Do you get it? I don't know whether that the choices of words help in the explanation.
Yes, I think I get it.
Yeah. So the manifestation of the ethical issue is the descriptive one, because everybody can see that we can actually describe what it is and whether it's right or wrong, all right? But the normative one is what we're thinking that it must be the case. So companies are actually putting down rules and regulations about ethical conduct, how a staff is supposed to carry themselves when the issue happens. And then the reality dawns on us when the actual issue happens, all right? And then we're supposed to go back to the drawing board, or we're supposed to affirm that particular position. David, I think, has written a lot of things. He says, there is a difference between being denied on the basis of disability that will be discriminatory and on the basis of lack of compartment. In this case, our refuse because of lack of compartment and not because of disability. Okay, these are the lawyers talking. So, all right, Nigel, let's take one last one before we move to.
I think it's interesting to know the fact that, when we're reading what you just put up, an official of our indicated that it's on their website that they don't take this disabled or people with crutches and all that. Mm-hmm. And I think Bridget spoke in the contrary that that's not actually the case. So now on their website, they have a policy for disabilities. And they have indicated the fact that...
Can I read it for you?
Bridget,
I'm on the website.
Bridget, let
Nigel
finish, and then you
It's interesting to know that they have said that our will ensure that customers with disabilities enjoy their flight with us. I think that's contradicting their statement that they don't support,
Exactly.
individuals with,
that's a contradiction. Yeah. Okay, that's a good.
But it's boldly stated on their website there.
But then, of course, the argument also would be that what's the definition of ours, disability? Yeah. So because if you don't define disability, because if somebody cannot speak, he's a disabled person. And then if somebody cannot walk, he's a disabled person. So I think that when we make some of these, when we make some of these, pronouncements or some of these policies, we also have to bear in mind the definition and the extent of what we think or what we say as. Are you with me? All right, Bridget, you wanted to.
Yeah. So, special needs on the website, they have it under special needs. They said prior arrangements have to be made for special assistance. Our terms and conditions have to be accepted by you and blah blah blah. You are eligible for special assistance if you have a disability, into brackets, wheelchair to the ramp. So they have stated clearly what disability is.
Yeah.
But this is the case. Rita Kriba was not in a wheelchair. She was just with the clutches.
Yeah.
If you understand.
Yeah.
She was just in the clutches. So, and to talk about the compartment, it's not as if she can't sit on the actual seat. She can sit on the actual seat and then have her clutches maybe on the side, or maybe you can put it at the back of the compartment or anything. So I really don't get it that they actually don't have a disclaimer because they have been specific.
But I think that from Nigel's perspective, he actually supports the point that you're making from what Nigel read. Okay, Faisal.
Yes, sir. I think I'll beg to disagree with the position taken by Bridget.
Okay.
Because from what she even read from the website,
I hope you are not bringing your legal perspective.
You have to do as a person. Oh no. What I'm saying is that if you have a special need, it's only proper that you let the service provider know you have a special need. If you don't tell me and I don't make arrangement for you, and especially because what she read actually indicated that special arrangement or special
services can be provided, but you must request for it. Because normally almost passengers who come do not request for such. So if you have a special need, let me know. Then if I don't make arrangement for you, then you can blame me for it.
Yeah, Faisal, I think that you have. Let me bring in a perspective here. I think that your position is more of you're putting the responsibility on the customer than the responsibility on the company. Remember that every business that is customer centric or customer oriented, the responsibility for knowing the customer state and as a result providing the right service does not lie on the customer, it lies on the business. So it is the business that is supposed to go a length to identify who is the customer and what needs they may have. You know, so if I'm a customer and I come to buy a ticket and I don't tell you that I have a particular problem, when the issues of ethics happen, I am not to blame, it's rather you, because a customer-centric business is the one who identifies customers' needs and go a length to solve it. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it's actually the reverse. Our is supposed to go the length to identify what the customer's needs are and then to solve it. Romeo.
Yes, sir. Let me just try to play the devil advocate here.
Yeah.
You see, there's always a golden rule principle.
Yeah.
You know, and businesses in Ghana has taken customers for granted for so long. So in my opinion, as advocacy students, what our has done, that's why I ask fundamental question. What is the role of the regulator in all of these things?
Yeah.
Because any country, there is a constitution and it governs every other things apart from what policy you, the business entity, has put up. So I think the golden rule principle must apply. Like, do unto what you want others to do unto you. Anybody can be in this situation. So we need to just, I mean,
yeah, right. And I think that's
what
one of us actually read from the regulator's perspective. So the regulator is supposed to put the base level of performance, all right, as a guide to everyone and say, whoever works in this industry is supposed to actually work to this base standard. Now, it's up to the business to then raise the bar, you know, by going over and above what the regulator has actually prescribed. Now, nobody is expected to go below the regulators. And that's why I think Nigel read, was it Nigel or one of, who read the regulators in the policy? You know, so the regulator says that no airline is supposed to actually refuse on board customer based on their disability. However, based on their, I think their ability or competence to take care of substance, I think there was a regulator in the position that was read. So the regulator's position, the business is supposed to use as the base level of service delivery and then build on it, you know, subsequently for their competitiveness. So you're right. We have to actually assimilate what the regulator position is and therefore build. Abracadabra.
You have said it all, and I was just about to agree with what Romeo is saying.
Yeah.
For me, I think we have actually failed as a nation because it's not even just for the aviation industry. If you look at even jobs, okay, companies, big companies, the banks and all that, we go to the university, we have friends that are blind, we have friends that are disabled, right? They are equally important to be employed as we are. Okay, but if you go to so many offices, do we even have the place where disabled people can use their wheelchairs to get into offices and all that? They are all set.
Exactly.
They are all set. I have a colleague who limps. Okay, so when she's coming every now and then, we will have to either she'll call you, though she can drive, she will just call you, and then you meet her downstairs, and then you climb with her with the stairs. These are the things we need to be thinking of. And if we are not ready as a nation to move in that direction, for me, I blame the regulator. I wouldn't even put the blame on our, because if we have strained policies that gives room for everybody, then we'll follow it. But if you are not willing to do all that, then you are below the bar. We don't even give you the regulation or the right to act.
That is it.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. I mean, this country has really taken a lot of things for granted, and for some reason, we don't actually test the states in many things. All right, we don't test the states, and for me, I think it's worrying. We have settled, in our level, and we think that things cannot. But you see, in countries that have been that have actually seen betterment of their lives, it is the people who took the state on. All right. Yeah. This ethics that we're talking about, when you go to our banks, they don't have hearing aids for what do you call deaf people. They don't have any mechanisms for managing people who are what do you call disabled. We're so many things, but we are comfortable with it seems. It seems that we are comfortable in our situation. So I agree with you. Clearly, we have failed as people. People, we have failed so many people. All right, and even in our own families, the way our attitude to our own family members who are in one way or the other incapacitated is appalling. And the state treats them anyhow. We will not complain. We will not challenge the state. Yet we are paying taxes for the state to take care of these people. So it's really an issue. All right, we have a couple of hands. Nana Kwesi, then I win, then we can proceed.
Thank you, Doc. Doc, I think that for our part as a state, we've been able to, at the very least, pass a legislation to take care of persons with disabilities. And in that legislation, which came into force in 2006, it gave a moratorium or a grace period of about 6 years within which all persons, all commercial buildings needed to make provision, including government itself, to make provision for accessibility to persons with disabilities. I agree with you on the point that we have not tested the law as we should have to ensure that it is being complied with. Because you go to many of these commercial or public buildings and you still have the situation where people with disabilities have serious challenges accessing these buildings. But I'm also happy to note that some entities, banks and what have you, are complying with these, because you go to some of their car parks and you have clearly designated areas for persons with disability. I'll give you an example. At the Law Court Complex, that's the huge court arena in the city of Accra, the center, you would realize that there are places for persons with disability where they are supposed to park, one. Also, if you go to the washrooms, there are places designated for persons with disabilities. So all of these come into play. And I think that we need to make a conscious effort as people who sit in management positions, planners, and what have you, and make contributions at these meetings to ensure that, look, whenever we are bringing up policies, we take into consideration persons with disabilities as well. Thank you.
That's a very good point, and especially the point that you say we as people must make conscious effort, to make sure that these issues are raised at management level or on that board meetings that we actually represent. And that's our fault. We do not make conscious of until we actually involved in the issue, maybe until we ourselves, we become, or our relatives become, maybe incapacitated as a result of something, before you see people reacting. But because we probably do not have our own, or we ourselves haven't been affected by situations, we just sit in our situation like this, and then we're going. So I think that it is crucial that we are having these conversations. And for me, I always say that, look, we have to be deliberate in our development.
Sure.
If we are not deliberate in our development, development is not what do you call magic, or is not Mihruso. It can be Mihruso, all right? Mihruso is that kind of a what you call it, blessing. It can be Mihruso because in America and all those places that we saw Martin Luther King and co demonstrating, they didn't do Mihruso and Ameba. I hope I'm telling the truth. Yeah.
Not at all.
So we can't do Miruso to think that.
No, I don't understand the term.
Yeah, Miruso Yakubu.
I jump and catch.
I claim it. We cannot be claiming development, as a blessing just by sleeping and waking up and then. We have to be deliberate. All right. I mean, yes.
Understand, sir.
It's interesting.
Yakubu, so add it to your vocabulary.
No, thank you.
All right. I mean, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so Doc, I think I was just going back to the earlier conversation that we had about how, the way we design things, the way the system works is based on the macro environment. I think for me, at some point when I told people, I think it was my birthday, and I was telling people how discriminatory, people are to left-handed people in a society. People were surprised how discriminatory our door handles, where we place our, even the cutlery we use. Everything is made for the right-handed people.
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget that most of these systems are created for the majority in society. And so I am of the opinion that ethical issues arise when the gray areas, when things happen for mostly not for majority people of the people, but for minority. I can mention, I don't know whether it was Hilda who said, because she was the only person in a
Hilda.
a company of sorry, what's happening? I'm getting feedback.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so in a company of airways, she felt discriminated or something. I think it has always been my opinion that where the majority agree to do things, you hardly see ethical issues. But where you have a minority of people, or for instance, in the disability case, aircrafts are generally, designed for a certain weight and body size. So when you go beyond that, or when you have certain issues, onboarding, that they cannot go and create a new aircraft for just that fewer people with those issues. So I think
you are completely right. You are completely right on that basis, because you see, as you said, that's why I said that we should be mindful that we are not homogeneous any longer. You see, the society's rule and regulation actually emanate from the society itself. All right. So over time, they become established as the rule of law or as the policy governing the society. When the society start experiencing, changes, all right, when changes start happening in the society and they become some minority group, that's where these ethical conduct actually start, or ethical issues start popping up. So you are fantastically right. By that point, a modernized or a modernizing society will start taking into consideration the new arrivals or the new changes that are happening within the society and respond to it. In fact, Hilda's point that she raised, the idea that company has mostly ever people itself is an ethical issue. How could a company actually have one tribe alone and actually exist in Ghana, a country that is supposed to be secular? So you realize that even the recruitment policy, all right, has an ethical issue in the recruitment policy. And that's why
even external people, as in electricians and plumbers, when they come, they are all of the same tribe.
Exactly, and that's a big issue. You see, and that's a big issue.
The bro issue.
So clearly, such a business.
Lives matter.
You see, so
lives matter.
Somebody would say fancy confederacy, right? So clearly, there's an issue. Clearly, there's an issue with this company, right? In fact, if you look at this framework that we looked at, this one, inventory of ethical issues in business. All right. If you go through the entire this entire framework, this company that Hilda is talking about has issues right through. All right. Some businesses may have maybe the first or second, some may have the third or the fourth, but this company that Hilda is describing actually has ethical issues right from the top to the bottom. In fact, I won't be surprised that whenever a customer goes there, they will treat them better than a shanty or a fancy customer.
And the shareholders will also be Ewes.
Obviously. And such a business, and I'm surprised that this business actually exists. You know, I would say that I drive better in Nairobi than Ghana. Yeah. You know, and such a business, we haven't tested the law on the business, on such a business, you see. So these are some of the things that we have to be mindful of. All right, Gideon, let's take your point last one so that we can go to I need to show you a video for us to have a discussion as well. Gideon.
Quick one. I hope we are not discussing this issue as though it pertains to only one tribe, because it cuts across. Yeah, because trust me, when you go to the vice president's office.
That's how we talked about the principle, right from the religion to others. So it's not only one. We're talking about the principle of selective.
Although you go to the vice president's office, from the receptionist, from the front desk, right up to they are all coming from a particular tribe.
Is this an allegation?
No, it's not an allegation. It's a fact.
Okay. Okay, but one thing I have to say. One thing I have to say though.
Go area, Gideon.
One thing I have to say.
Hey, Faisal.
Gideon.
Gideon, it's a no-go area.
Emmanuel.
Faisal, it's not to. We are discussing. We are finding ways we can.
Yes, sir.
Emmanuel, pay attention. One thing we have to know is that in the university we say the academic freedom, right? So we are allowed to actually cite examples so long as it's for academic discussions, but it doesn't go out, please. Yeah. It stays in the classroom. Are you with me? Yeah. So you are allowed to cite examples, etc. But it doesn't go. It stays in the classroom. All right. All right. Fantastic. Okay. So let's go to the next point. Let's look at the approaches to business ethics. Now, how do you exercise ethical decisions? All right. Practically, how do you exercise ethical decisions? So you are at work and there's an issue at stake. It's a gray area. You have no direction. How do you exercise in ethical decisions? One of them is about convention approach, all right? Based on how common society today views business ethics and on common sense, all right? So you could come to ethical judgment based on what actually pertains within the system, okay? And that's why at some point, the issue of no returns policy, people couldn't challenge it because it looked like that's what actually, pertained in business. Over time, I'm sure that if you buy something and it's defective, and then you go to, the company for return and they don't take it, you definitely would not take that position, all right? You would insist that they change it. Why? Because over time, we have come to realize that effective products must be returned, all right? So the conventional approach to making ethical decisions, and I'm sure the staff themselves would actually obliged by them because they know that, the position is that, replacing or, accepting return defective goods. So one of the ways of making ethical decisions is about convention, looking at the conventional practice. What guides society? What is actually society's, this definition of right and wrong and fairness, all right? That can actually guide you to make ethical decisions or to come to ethical conclusion. So in companies where there are no guidelines, that is, your bosses have not given you a guideline as to how to make ethical decisions, you want to look at the prevailing values that actually govern conduct as your benchmark for making those decisions. I hope you understand the conventional approach. Okay. Now, the next approach is the principles approach. Now, principles approach says that ethical conduct or coming to ethical understanding or decision is based on ethical principles. And in ethical principles, we have two of them, deontological principles and then teleological principles. I mean, these are supposed to guide your actions and justify your behaviors and your policies. Now, deontology actually says that so long as part of the decision or part of the action is right, all right? So long as part of the action is right, that is ethical. Are you with me? So if you actually think that your grandmother is suffering, people who actually opt for assisted suicide, all right? If you think that your grandmother is suffering so much, and this is a grandmother you love so much, but they've been sick for a long time, and in your thinking they are suffering, and you want to actually, as some people will say, especially those in Europe, will say that you want to relieve them of the pain. They will take that person to a hospital for assisted, killing or assisted suicide. And these people who take that decision would argue from the perspective that they do not want to see their loved ones suffer. And so they think that death is a point of relief, and therefore they would actually opt for that decision. Now, when that decision is opted, all right, that kind of ethical decision is actually called deontological ethical principles. So somebody is actually taking a decision and thinking that part of that decision or action that I'm taking is beneficial to the parties involved. And as a result, they will take it. I'll cite you another example. There was a story about a British banker who stole so much money and went to Zimbabwe, to a village in Zimbabwe, to develop the place. All right. Now, this guy actually, built schools, etc. in Zimbabwe. Now, the question is it right or wrong? And his defense is that he's right. So from the ontological position, because part of his action is right, it's ethical. Now, teleological says that it doesn't matter, what is involved in the action. So long as the consequence is negative on the parties involved, then your actions were unethical or your decisions were unethical. So you see two principles here. One says if part of your actions or decisions were right, it's an ethical, a decision that you've taken. The other one says so long as the results of your action, the final result, the consequentialism is that the final result of your action was, right before it becomes ethical, or if it was wrong, it is unethical. I hope you understand it too. Hello, guys. Are you here?
Yes, Doc. Yes, Doc. Yes, Doc. Yes, Doc.
Doc, it's a bit problematic.
Okay, let's hear you on that.
It's a bit problematic because if you are saying that
which one is problematic?
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah. Let's
both of them. For me, the source action itself, in the example of the banker, the British banker who stole those huge sums of money, the source action itself was unethical, and anything that flows from it does not justify or, as it were, clean the fact that the source action was unethical.
Yeah,
and on the other hand, on the telos argument, I also think that what it seems to do is to describe, or as it were, justify the ethicalness or otherwise of the action based on the outcome instead of the decision itself. So that is also problematic because if the decision itself is wrong, anything that flows from it should be wrong. It's unethical.
Exactly.
So it's a bit problematic.
Yeah. So, and that is about knowledge, isn't it? And the way we are governed. You know, every issue, you know, in the world, that any decision that you take would have, you know, one part being good, one part being bad. So the issue is that which frame guides your decision, and that's why I don't know whether last time I told you about Anthony Giddens' position of the third way. You know, increasingly you see people moving to the center, all right, because majority of our issues, and I remember that one politician, you know, one time told me that, look, you can't stand in between, you have to belong, all right. This is when I had actually, you know, what you call been summoned, you know, at some level of authority, and I've been told that my actions were, my conduct were not appropriate, and therefore they were sacking me.
Wow.
And they sacked me, right? They sacked me, but I felt good about my actions. I thought my actions were right.
Sure.
They sacked me that I had my actions, my conduct was inappropriate. And his position was that he said, look, you can't stand in the middle. You have to belong. You have to belong to the left or to the right. I said, well, I don't belong anywhere. All right. And that's why I took that action. So I can appreciate the point that you're making, Chris, that in coming to an ethical decision, you would always be faced with these two issues. And when you are faced with the gray point, when you are faced with a gray point to make a decision, you have to have a perspective, whether it's a deontological perspective or teleological perspective, in order that you can actually justify your actions. Mind you, if you don't have a theoretical lens in which you took the decision, when you are confronted, you can't explain it. Are you with me? Because sure. it would not be justifiable, or it would not make sense to anyone. You only make sense when you have a theoretical underpinning, or you have a rationale behind why you took a decision. Are you with me? So you can actually, from what you are saying, you are someone who is taking the middle ground, all right? But then the definition of what is the middle ground itself can be problematic. Do you get it? So sure. We have to be mindful of what ethical decisions are we taking and which framework is guiding us, you know? So when you take the what do you call, the Krieber's example that we used or we cited, which part of this would you say maybe the salesperson or the person who was at the desk, you know, used to refuse her or allow her? You realize that they didn't have a clear-cut, you know, ideological position or theoretical position that guides their conduct. Do you get it? But if you say that, of course, the decision was taken based on the theological, you know, perspective, then you are saying that, of course, if you onboard her and there's an emergency and she loses her life, you think that that would be much more, you know, consequential, and that would be much more, you know, tougher to take than refusing her, which is the lesser evil. Are you with me? Of course. But also saying that, okay, by allowing her on board, and if they say that you actually, you know, flouted the company's regulation, this staff can say that I did that for the good of the lady and for the company. Why? Because the company happens to save its image. The lady happens to achieve her trip goals, isn't it? Because she was going for a meeting. So as a staff or as a human being, whether you are in business or whether you are not in business, you must have one principle that is guiding your conduct in order that you'll be able to justify it, whether in front of your bosses or in front of the law or in front of the media. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. Who has another? Gideon, I think your hand is up. Gideon, is your hand up? Okay. So I suppose you understand the principles, you know, of the ethics, the approach.
Yes.
Right?
Sorry, Doc, I think I didn't place down my hand. Sorry.
I'd like to ask a question. Yes. So when it comes to ethical issues, we realize that a lot of employees are usually who usually find themselves in one trouble or the other, and they would have to, be faced with a hearing and so on. So most of the time you realize that the employer does not really look at the issue the way you're breaking it down, like in these three approaches that you're saying. So the issue is probably evaluated on the surface, and once it comes up that the person is wrong, then the person is fired. It looks like a lot of people may have been fired because this knowledge is not very common, maybe to even probably HR person.
Yeah.
It's coming to me as
that's why you have to have a union. That's why you have to have a union. And you see, another thing about what sometimes, I don't know, but I'm not speaking of my frustrations here. But look, Romeo, sometimes I sit down and I look in the frame and I think we are taking so many people for granted, but we're not challenging the system. See, I've the way I am, you can imagine that I come into trouble with the issues with the law a lot of times, right? Look, when I worked in what do you call it, T-Mobile, I had so many issues sometimes, and most of the time, before I go for disciplinary, I will request for a union person to join me. In fact, my cousin just had an issue with his company last 2 weeks, and he called me because he knew that I was troublesome every time I had issues with my employers. So he called me. He was asking me what to do, and I was telling him some of the things. Right? In England, for example, you cannot be taken into disciplinary without a union person. All right? You cannot be taken into discipline without a union person. A union members or the executives of union, if they say that you're a union person in your company, it means that you have read the union regulation, you have so much knowledge about these things that you can defend, the employee when they're in disciplinary. So Linda, the point that you're making that people are fired, look, you do not have to know all these, but you should have a union representation who can firmly and fairly defend you, in some of these instances. And some of these things, some of you, the HR is supposed to be educating the employees, all right, or having orientation for employees on some of these principles, so that when the employee is taking a decision, they are competent enough to take a decision that has a basis or a rationale, all right?
Sure.
So if somebody asks you, or a company asks you that, why is it that you were told to do this and you didn't do that? You're supposed to actually have a firm rationale behind why, But in most cases, as we said, we are so, out of clue. We are so oblivious of some of these things that we could actually firmly justify it and then give rationale behind, why certain decisions were taken. And these are some of the issues or the problems that we have in this country. All right.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question? All right.
I'm okay.
All right. Okay. So the third one is about ethical test approach. All right. Now this one is when the company has given you a clear guidelines, yes or no, issues, and or sometimes you call it a Q&A, whereby they tell you that if you're confronted with issue A, this is the approach. If you're confronted with the issue B, this is the approach. So it's based on short practical questions to guide ethical decision making and behavior and practices at work. Now, not all companies actually have this. In fact, most companies in our system, as Linda is actually talking about, have no ethical, guidelines. So staff are always confused, what kind of decision they must arrive at. And they end up erring on the part of companies' rules and regs, so-called disciplinary rules and regulations, all right? But very prepared and competent businesses or organizations would have at least some ethical guidelines that actually tell people that when you're confronted with issue A, B, C, D, this is how you actually, do that. Now, how do you compile some of these things? Based on the company's own experiences. Every day you are faced with ethical challenges. Now, the HR is supposed to compile these, experiences and make sure that they are put forward for discussion and a guideline written down for it. I am not sure whether for example, based on Ms. Kruber's issue, have actually updated or have actually compiled ethical conduct? I am not sure. I don't know, but I doubt if they have. All right, because our companies are not developmental oriented. They do not take issues as they happen down, in order that it can guide our conduct in future. We don't. So those of you who have the opportunity to have some of these lessons and these classes, please, you can start, what do you call, practicing some of these things so that our companies
sure.
Appear down.
Hello, Doc.
Yes, appear down.
So I'm thinking that the ethical test approach, this is what forms the basis for code of conduct for most companies.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So then we can form an advocacy group now.
Yes. I mean, Linda has promised me that's one of your deliverables. So Linda, the advocacy group starts, all right?
Yes,
it must.
And then we can actually produce some of these guidelines to help our colleagues, all right? So that's a good thing. All right. I hope you guys understand the 3 approaches to business ethics.
Yeah.
Very well, sir.
Now, the next thing that we'll look at, I mean, I would want to play a video for us to discuss it within the context that we have. But let's look at ethics and law. Here, I'm sure Faisal and Co can actually. So they say that the law and ethics can overlap in many respects. All right, the law is a reflection of what society thinks are minimal standards of conduct and behavior, and then of course, we say that the 2 key questions we have to think, we have to focus on: why do firms do illegal things? And what are the consequences of engaging in illegal behavior? So, any contribution from you, Faisal? The law and ethics.
Nana Kwesi is also there.
Nana Kwesi, you too. Yeah, you too. You can help us. Yeah. Any contribution from you guys? Yeah. Nana Kwesi.
So, I think that companies engage primarily in illegal things in order to advance their business interests. So they know what the proper thing to do is, yet they disregard it with the hope that they will never be caught, and then simply to advance their business interests. I'll give you an example, a popular example. There is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act by the US, which is very sweeping in that US companies all over the world, if they are engaging with governments, especially in Africa, you are not supposed to be giving out under table envelopes and what have you. Exactly. Yet you have these things happening every day. One example, Mabe and Johnson. Mabe and Johnson, and this gave rise to a huge scandal in this country. It was just to secure contracts in order to advance their business interests in Ghana.
Yeah.
So that is one of the reasons why companies do illegal things.
What is the gray area between ethics and law? I mean,
the gray area between ethics and law is that not everything that is unethical is illegal.
That's right. Yeah.
Not everything that is unethical is illegal, and not everything that is legal is ethical.
Ethical. Great. Okay. Good point. All right. Thank you. Right. Faisal, do you also want to add something to it?
Okay. Give us practical example.
David. David is David is asking you to give practical example.
A practical example of not everything that is unethical is illegal.
Yes.
Okay, David, I'll come back to you on those examples. Let's proceed. I'll come back to you. Let me
Thank you. Thank you, Nana. Thank you.
So I just want us to watch a video, and I think that some of your questions, would be in this video. I don't know whether some of you have heard about the name Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader in the US. He once contested for, as independent candidate. And in fact, he sometimes come in and out, He was so popular. He became so popular because he fought the auto industry in America purely on certain ethical issues that actually bordered on legal. And just as Nana Kwesi just said, we'll come to appreciate the boundaries, Now,
Doc,
yeah.
Just before we watch the video, if I may just respond to the example question.
Mm-hmm.
So, one example would be tax avoidance.
Yeah.
Tax avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
Tax avoidance, strictly speaking, is not illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Tax avoidance is simply arranging your affairs or the business affairs in such a way that you minimize your tax liability.
That's right. That's right.
Tax evasion is what is illegal.
Yeah.
Tax evasion is what is illegal. But some people argue that tax avoidance in itself is unethical because you should, as a business, be paying the maximum tax to the state.
Mm-hmm.
That is the argument some people come forward with.
You are very right. So when we take the principles of deontology,
I agree with you.
So when you take the principle of deontology and teleological, principles of ethics into consideration, somebody would say that, they are trying to minimize their tax responsibility so that they pay employees more. All right. Now, part of that act or action is actually good. It's for employee welfare. So would that be ethical or unethical? You see the discussion here. So you see that from the deontological perspective, the company perhaps is right because part of their action is that they want to pay employees more so that employees' welfare and livelihood could be taken care of. All right. But the end result, consequentially, that is avoiding to pay, the state or what you are duty bound, or your responsibility towards the state, you have evaded it. Obviously, that makes it unethical. You see, so
Doc.
Yeah.
A quick one about the book Bolton wrote concerning. I'm talking about the law and ethics. The presidency. That because there's a lot of issues around it now.
Yeah. So you're asking whether it was ethical or unethical?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to many people, it was ethical.
Yes,
but
for me,
course,
my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, if what Trump people are saying that there are a lot of state secrets that could actually jeopardize, that could actually hurt America, then that argument, if it's tenable, then that could be unethical, because then the issue is that to a large extent it's going to affect the state. But I suppose that defense is actually the Trump people trying to safeguard their own.
Sure.
But Doc, even if that argument is sustainable, it wouldn't only be unethical, but it would be illegal because Americans take very serious view on releasing state secrets.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that even the publisher would have actually agreed to publish.
Precisely. So by now they would have arrested Bolton and everyone who is involved in publishing that book.
Yeah, you're right.
They won't arrest him simply because when the information is declassified, nobody can do anything to America.
Excellent. Okay, let's watch this video. And as I said, Ralph Nader had been a consumer rights advocate, just like we have Kofi Kapito, all right? And and I always say that if Kofi Kapito's setup is very, legitimate and credible, I wish that businesses would rather support him to do more, all right, than having a very, what do you call, I don't know how to put it, but having a very, antagonistic, position towards him. So Ralph Nader has been a consumer advocate for long, and he was bent out to actually expose the ethical conduct of the auto industry in America. And let's see, what actually transpired. Just about 10 minutes. So we're going to start a video, and I hope you like it. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
In the first half of the 20th century, American cars were designed for style and status, with little regard for safety. Ralph Nader, a lawyer and consumer rights advocate, explored car safety issues, publishing the book Unsafe at Any Speed in 1965, which gained national attention for its examination of the design-in dangers present in most cars at the time. He encountered opposition from car manufacturers, especially General Motors. Nader's book and the response to it gave impetus to auto safety hearings held in Congress in 1966 and helped to push through the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act, which provided for the establishment of car safety standards, and the Highway Safety Act, which required states to adopt road safety programs which met these standards. Due to these safety measures, millions of lives have been saved in the decades since. After World War II, the automobile became a very important part of American culture. The economy grew, and as people moved to the suburbs, the demand for cars increased. Cars in the 1950s and 60s were manufactured and advertised for style, speed, power, and luxury, with little concern for safety, despite the fact that the number of casualties and injuries was on the rise. By 1965, car crashes were the leading cause of death among Americans under 44 years of age. Though there were attempts to introduce safety features, including a popular seatbelt option introduced by Ford in the mid-1950s, which it discontinued when faced by price competition from GM, the general feeling among car manufacturers was that safety doesn't sell. In the 1950s, university car collision studies had caught the attention of politicians. In 1956, congressional hearings were held examining design deficiencies that were present in cars, but did not result in any legislation. Ralph Nader, a lawyer interested in consumer advocacy, began his exploration of car safety issues while he was still a student at Harvard Law School. His article in the Harvard Law Record, The American Automobile Designed for Death, advocating for increased regulation, caught the attention of Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the Assistant Secretary of Labor under President Kennedy, who had written a recent article on the epidemic on the highways. He hired Nader as a consultant, where he researched and wrote position papers on the federal government's approach to auto safety regulation. Nader's exploration into car safety led to the 1959 publication of his article, The Safe Car You Can't Buy, in The Nation. In it, Nader claimed that Detroit today is designing automobiles for style, cost, performance, and calculated obsolescence, but not for safety. He argued that car manufacturers must be made responsible to protect the consumer from his own vanity. This led to a 1964 contract with Grossman Publishers to continue researching car safety deficiencies and document them in a book. In March 1965, Senators Abraham Ribicoff and Robert Kennedy began hearings for the Senate Subcommittee on Executive Reorganization on how the government should be involved with public safety.
Collision takes 5 lines.
Nader was asked to serve as an unpaid advisor to the Committee on Auto Safety. In November 1965, Unsafe at Any Speed was published, claiming that car manufacturers were ignoring important auto safety issues. While most accidents were blamed on impaired or distracted driving, Nader argued the cars themselves were dangerous. Nader claimed that the second collision in an accident, where the rider hits the hard and sharp interior of the car, was where the majority of injuries happened. The book went on to blame car manufacturers for these flaws, describing one of the greatest acts of industrial irresponsibility in the present century, and claiming that it was a conscious decision to avoid safety measures due to the extra cost.
1960 to 63 Corvair.
While many cars at the time had similar unsafe features, the book highlighted the Chevrolet Corvair, which, when it debuted in 1960, was advertised as the most profoundly revolutionary car ever offered by a major manufacturer. It was the first American car to have an independent rear suspension and rear engine, and one of the first compact cars. At the time of the book's publication, the Corvair was involved in over 100 outstanding lawsuits, most of which were described by Nader as one-car accidents due to the tendency of the Corvair to skid and flip over. Its many design flaws made it extremely dangerous to drive, no matter what the speed. The book also pointed out that it would have cost less than $10 to fix the problem that caused the car to flip over. Nader encountered immediate opposition from car companies. One day after publication, the New York Times ran an article in which the auto industry denied his claims that safety issues were present, a problem, or were an attempt to cut costs. In addition to disputing Nader's claims in the press, GM hired a detective agency to investigate Nader's personal life, having him tailed around Washington and harassing Nader with anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night. This came to the attention of Senator Abraham Ribicoff, who immediately summoned James Roche, the chairman of General Motors, to testify in the hearings. Roche admitted that GM had undertaken an investigation and eventually apologized. However, he still denied claims made about the Corvair, starting open confrontation about these claims in the committee hearings. The scandal surrounding GM's actions made the hearings national news, and Unsafe at Any Speed became a bestseller.
Obviously transformed public opinion. The people were pretty outraged. It all came down to Congress.
Soon, the pressure resulting from the national attention on car safety issues led to legal changes. In his 1966 State of the Union address, President Johnson proposed new legislation.
A new Department of Transportation is needed to bring together our transportation activities, nor can we fail to arrest the destruction of life and property on our highways. I will propose a Highway Safety Act of 1966 to seek an end to this mounting tragedy.
Within months, Congress held hearings that investigated the built-in deficiencies and passed new legislation. On September 9, 1966, President Johnson signed the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act, which provided for research into car safety issues, monitoring and reporting on these issues, and the establishment of industry standards.
Will somehow be able to build in more safety without building on more costs.
On the same day, he signed the Highway Safety Act, which required states to adopt road safety programs which met federal standards. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration was created to carry out these responsibilities. Over the next decade, standards requiring seatbelts, collapsible steering columns, strengthened door latches, shatterproof windshields, padded dashboards, and other safety features were adopted. Manufacturers were prohibited from selling cars that did not meet standards and were required to recall and fix cars in which defects were later discovered. President Johnson said, "More than 1,500,000 of our fellow citizens have died in our streets and highways, nearly 3 times as many Americans as we have lost in all of our wars. Safety is no luxury item, no optional extra. It must be a normal cost of doing business." Time reported in 1969 that Corvair sales had dropped 93%, largely due to safety concerns from consumers. Other motor companies also experienced lower car sales, which were blamed in part on the car safety publicity. A 1971 Harvard report stated that the net effect of the legislation has been positive. With standards in effect, companies began to compete for safety. Airbags, which were required starting in the mid-1980s, reduced injuries from accidents, and NHTSA recalls have dealt with many significant safety issues. Safe at Any Speed and the consequent legislation caused the public to discard their belief that only style and comfort were important in cars and to exchange that for the idea that safety was equally important. In 2015, The Nation magazine reported that 3.5 million lives had been saved, and the number of deaths per mile had been reduced by 80% due to the implementation of car safety standards. Ralph Nader's exploration of motor vehicle safety and unsafe at any speed, and the reaction to it, helped spur legislation which has altered the way that American cars are manufactured, ultimately saving millions of lives.
Okay, so I hope you followed it. I know the language was a little bit ish, and should be and things, but I hope you understand.
Yes, we do.
Sorry, Vicky.
No, I said we do. We understand it.
Excellent, good point. Now, before I come in with my another question, I forgot to ask you. You know the policy that you said for 6 years we're supposed to get to. You remember you made that point that the Disability Act. Hello, Nana Kwesi. Hello. Okay.
Hello, sir. I can hear you. I lost you a little bit. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, I said that there was a question I wanted to ask you, but I forgot. You know, you mentioned that the Disability Act was supposed to take us 6 years to implement it.
There was a grace period for everyone to comply.
Okay. When was it? When did it come to effect?
It was passed in 2006.
Okay, so we are almost done with the grace period, right?
We are done. It came, I mean, everybody ought to have complied by 2012.
Okay, so if we take into consideration the fact that we had grace period for that long, and we are in 2020.
Yes.
Where are we?
Which is why
we are 0.0, right?
Not entirely. We are not at 0.0 entirely. The reason being that, yes, today when you go to some public and commercial properties, you see that the law is being complied with. But I go back to the point you made earlier about testing the law. About testing the law. I, for one, I volunteer for a disability group of people suffering from cerebral palsy. And my role there, what I do for them is to take on the challenges that they face in their everyday life. For instance, refusal to admit their children to school because of their special needs and what have you. And then I do advocacy for them by writing letters to these schools and entities to point out to them that what they are doing is an offense to the law. And that they equally have rights that are protected by law, and that those rights should be respected. But you only have a few people who would go as far as coming to, as it were, see a lawyer or asserting those rights. So there's the need for sensitization. There's the need for awareness creation. But I go back to the point about we ourselves, we may not be suffering from any disability, making that conscious effort to always have them in mind when we sit at these board meetings and policy decision-making meetings.
Excellent. Thanks for the good job that you're doing. Guys, so when you watch videos like this, documentaries like this, all right, sometimes you grieve for your own country, all right? Now, if you look at Ralph Nader and the kind of action he took, entire, auto industry of America, and the kind of impact he's made globally, all right, then you realize that we're not doing anything. Do you get it? Now, let's discuss the video before we rant. And if you leave me, I may be ranting throughout. But let's discuss the video. Okay, so what point comes to you in terms of the discussions that we've had? Ethics, even you can even look at the lobbying part of it. Let's use let's discuss to wrap up the class. So what points come to you when you watch the video? Yeah.
Well, Doc, if I may contribute.
Yeah.
So what I got in there was that there was a general idea by the car manufacturers that their safety lies with you, the user.
Yeah.
the owner of the vehicle and you, the user.
Yeah.
But what Ralph Nader did was to turn that around, that responsibility around to the manufacturers, such that they would have the responsibility to ensure that whatever needs to be put in place to ensure the ultimate safety of the user has been done or taken care of by the manufacturer, and
you are fantastically right. So the manufacturers were putting the safety responsibility on the drivers, you know, and they kept saying that the accidents were as a result of careless driving, etc. So there are points where, as businesses, and as we were discussing earlier when I told Faisal that it is the responsibility of ours to find out, you know, at every length who the customer is and what needs they have. So if you look at this video, the initial debate, the argument from the car manufacturers were that people were driving irresponsibly, people were going to parties, having drinks, and then driving. Of course, it is true, but Ralph Nader made it possible for them to know that actually it was the irresponsibility of the car manufacturers that were causing that epidemic. All right. So one of the ethical issues that we actually see from here is that as a business, you do not actually think that the responsibility lies in the hands of the consumer. Even if it is the case, you are supposed to take steps like education, awareness creation, so that people would be aware that they are supposed to drive responsibly without drinking. So even where the responsibility lies in the hands of the consumer because of the nature of the issue, you still have a responsibility. And that's why we see drink safely or drink responsibly. When you are pregnant, mother, you don't drink. We started seeing some of these things because, yes, you are not in the customer's abode to stop them from drinking if they have to drink. But you have to create that awareness that drinking is not good for a pregnant person, that drinking is not good for an 18 or somebody who is below the 18 years old. You hold the responsibility. So for us as a customer-centric businesses, we shouldn't think that ethical responsibility lies in the hands of the consumer. Yes, the consumer must play their part, but it very significantly lies in your hands. Good point. Elliot.
Yes, Doc. From the video, one thing I noticed was that the support from the legislature helped, in the advocacy that much. Looking at our part here in Ghana here, sometimes you are advocating for certain things and people in power or authority, especially the legislature, seem unconcerned, and it makes that very difficult. In Ralph Nader's case, number one, his rights were protected when they found out that he was being stalked and harassed by these companies. Two, certain laws were passed to make sure that the manufacturers comply with safety requirements. And if these things exist, it creates an enabling environment for advocacy to strive and for the desired results to be achieved.
Of course. So Ralph Nader was empowered. He was empowered because he saw the lawmakers taking action. All right. In fact, he was invited by the gentleman who was the aide to the president then, for them to to continue the research or the investigation. And when the automakers were going after his life, he sought protection. So again, how do we empower people who seek to do right and people who make sure that they actually put the system in the right path? In our businesses, sometimes you find that certain staff want to do the right thing. They are the ones that actually incur the wrath of management. Yeah. And then they say, and you want to empower the customer. You want you want us to lose money. But this is the staff trying to do the right thing. So again, we have to be mindful of how do we protect, how do we empower people who actually seek to do the right thing, even if that has not been enshrined in our business code of conduct. How do we see the positives of their action and incorporate it and rather empower them so that they become an example for others to follow? All right, Nigel.
Yes, sir. I think two things I picked up from the video. In our initial class with Mr. Elvis of the Finder newspaper, indicated that when you are advocating for stuff, you need the media's backing, either print media or social media. And I see this being employed in Nader's case, where he had newspapers, radio stations, and even his own book to push his agenda on what he was advocating for. And the second thing was, it was quite evident that he was very knowledgeable on what he was advocating for, because this is a whole automobile industry, and for you to go against them, you need to have some background knowledge guiding your advocacy. So I think these are two main things I picked up.
I mean, these are self-explanatory. Fantastic. So from the first lecture, we saw how to advance advocacy and be very, potent. And all the factors that were highlighted in the first lecture by Elvis, you can see them at play in this particular video. Awesome stuff. Who else want to say something? It's 11:40 now. We have to be wrapping up. Who else want to say something?
I think that I'd like to mention the impact, the fact that it reduced 80% of accidents within the period. I think that was very good. And I'm just wondering what would have happened if he thought that it wasn't necessary for him to embark on this.
Exactly. We would have been dying in Ghana by now. Even if Americans, they were dying like this. So automobile industry is a global, thing. I mean, their impact is global. So if you look at the one act done by one person could change and bring in, a lot of safety measures, car seats, ABS, and even airbags. The act of one person has actually caused a global benefit or global effect. If he hadn't actually put the agenda, by now all of us would be dead by now.
But sir, in a place like America, and considering how big the automobile industry is, what Nader had was the buy-in from government.
That's right.
That was key, because a behemoth like the automobile industry, you're looking at GM, Ford, these were the big giants. And when it comes to automobiles, and for one man to go against them, I mean, yes, the media and everybody was in there, but you're talking about the presidential aid, you're talking about Congress, you're talking about all these entities actually buying in and giving him the necessary protection, because this game is not easy.
Yeah,
you give the necessary protection to be able to go on and achieve that goal, and then to also push the legislation in that direction. And in a situation like that, without that, I don't think he could have succeeded.
Excellent. Good point.
Doc, I'd like to also make a point. So I've just, as the discussion went on, I was asking myself, would that change have occurred if the legislature did not get involved? I think that from the video, I think that perhaps that change could also have occurred if the legislature had not gotten involved. And it's based on the fact that it would have taken more time, precisely, because if you look at the video, it tells you that sales were dropping for these car manufacturing companies. Vehicle sales were dropping on the basis of safety concerns by the consumers.
So the public education was in effect, but of course the law they sped it up.
So we would have gotten there, but it would probably have taken a longer time.
And that ties in our point that we made earlier, that development is deliberate. If we leave development to public knowledge, we may get there, but it will take some time. So there must be an impetus. There must be a force, behind those acknowledgement, behind those, things. Just like we were talking about, there must be policy to drive the change. If there's no policy to drive the change, as Samuel was actually saying, if the legislature hadn't come in, if government hadn't actually given it impetus, perhaps they would have had so many deaths like Corona before things change. All right. So that's a very crucial point. All right. Anybody else? Anybody else to add to this as we wrap up? I'm taking my 15 minutes back, as you can imagine.
That's great.
So the point that we raised, I mean, safety measures, you realize that, we ask the question, why would firms or companies do the illegal things or the unethical things? And you realize that in Ralph Nader's video, they talked about their preoccupation for style and comfort. All right, preoccupation for style and comfort. In the beginning, they thought that people wanted style, people wanted comfort. And so they were preoccupied to provide these needs as opposed to safety, which they thought was expensive. And remember, they said GM actually implemented the first safety measures, and they thought that it was too expensive. It made the cars too expensive, and people didn't buy. As a result, they ignored it. They abandoned that project, all right? So at some point in time, we have to lead consumers, because you see, we may be doing the right thing, but consumers may not be responding, all right, because of their own needs. It is about time, and I keep saying that it's about time our politicians become very, very visionary and very tough. Because look, not everything that voters or people would understand. And Nkrumah said that if I knew Ghanaians wanted milk, I would have actually let it flow through the taps. All right. That tells you that not everything that people will understand. You may have to, sometimes you have to take tougher decisions to develop the country, but people may not agree with you at some point, and therefore you would chicken out. But if you do that, it would not be in the interest of the people. So at some point in time, companies have to take tougher decisions for the benefit of customers. But the key is, how do you get the customers to appreciate it? It means you need a lot more education. You need a very convincing education. All right. Because why did GM actually abandon their safety project earlier on? Because they thought it wasn't selling, and they thought customers didn't like it, all right? But in the end, it was actually affecting them in the end, because look at what happened. So yes, we may know that customers have one or two needs, but they may not need the right thing. But it's about you providing that and trying to educate the customers to come along, with you. We also saw that safe cars were too expensive, as we said, and then they ignored important auto safety issues, as we saw them. Accidents were blamed on customers, on the drivers, as we have already discussed. Ralph Nader made sure that that understanding, or that ideology was erased, to know that actually it was the fault of the car manufacturers. All right. And then conscious decisions by automakers to ignore safety, we've talked about that. And then they denied auto issues, of course, we've discussed all this. Anyway, thank you guys. I hope, the class was interesting and exciting. I hope you understood it well.
Yes.
Very, very interesting.
And
Thank you.
We can actually, the key and most important thing is that we can relate it to our business and then start effecting changes and making some impact, isn't it?
Yes, Doc.
All right. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody said the slides. Haven't I given out the slides?
Yes.
Giving them up.
No, please, you give it out. I've given it to everyone.
Excellent. Okay. All right, guys.
Doc, I was going to ask one last question.
Okay, please do.
So in my line of work, I mean, I'm a lawyer, and you have clients who come to you. It's the client's responsibility to tell you the facts of their cases, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yeah.
But I've had a couple of experiences.
Yeah.
Because when you tell the lawyer the truth, the lawyer knows how to package the case to the court. We are not going to lie to the court, but it's the presentation.
Yeah.
Now, I've had a couple of situations where clients in the witness box are asked questions, and what they told me is entirely different from what is being said in court. And it puts you in a very dirty situation.
Yeah.
Very, very tight corner, because you go to court with a certain story, and all of a sudden, under cross-examination, the client says something entirely different.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think. Yeah, I think. Okay, before you come in, I think that I don't know whether or how much it would take for you to have other observation, but you see, in research as academics, there is what we call triangulation. There's what we call triangulation. You have to triangulate your research, process, i.e., you have to find different sources. Maybe in your field line of work, it could be difficult or it could be too expensive.
Yeah.
But I would say that there any other way that you can seek to find more information about your client. You know, I know, I mean, I do political strategy. So when we're looking at vetting candidates, all right, especially when you're putting a candidate dossier together, you're asking the candidate to tell you all the filthy things they've done, in order that just in case it comes into the media glare,
it comes out, you know how to defend it.
Right? Now, candidates may tell you the best part of their stories, the good things that they've done, etc. But they will not tell you that they've swindled somebody's money, etc. Right? Now, so in dossier development in political strategy, you are supposed to find other means to get those information, and then confirm with the customer what do they know about it. If you want to be a very good political strategist, all right. So maybe some of these things that you want to employ, and of course, if it's expensive, of course you would have to think about adding it to your cost, you know, for the client. But you need to have a very compelling case before you can actually win them the cases in courts. So some of these things have to be known to the client, but then you also have to find a way of getting those information, because as you said, you can look stupid in court if you don't have a compelling. I don't know. It's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dog.
Yes.
When can I register for the political strategy course?
Okay, it's part. It's a year 2 in the MAMS class, but we haven't brought it to the IB.
Okay.
But we can organize maybe a session for those of you who are interested. I can.
Yeah.
All right.
A lot of talk is important because there's no business without political strategy.
Of course,
it's important.
All right, great guys. All right, thank you, sir. What about?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, Michael, I will send a recording to Linda, and I'm sure he will put it across.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Enjoy your weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.